Hello, everybody. It's me, Darren Hupke, co-host of Not Loading Podcast. That podcast you guys listened for a little while and then fell off the radar. What do I got to say about that? Sorry, apologize. It's free and it's still new, so sorry. What I want to do now is give you guys a little bit of an update. We've got a couple of voicemail messages I want to touch base on and play for you now, do a little bit of a feedback episode. And Rich and I, we promise you guys that we will have a new episode coming out for you soon. Work, life, obligations, holidays, I don't know. Things have all just kind of lined up and, things happen. So we want to give it out to you in a more regular schedule. That was the intention and just didn't happen at this point. So hopefully you guys missed us and still want more from us. So like I said, today we will bring you a solo episode with just me. I will respond to those couple of voicemail messages we have, maybe do a little solo Darren soapbox style rant, and hopefully bring you guys an update in the coming days of a brand new episode with me and Rich. Excited to talk, excited to chat, excited to nerd out about games with everybody who's currently listening and subscribing. So that will all happen right here, right now.
What's up? So, when I think of the word overhyped, I immediately think of Watch Dogs. That's the most recent game that I can think of that was extremely overhyped for me. I was looking forward to it. You could hack into anything at any time, hack into people's cell phones that are walking by in the street. Well, that wasn't the case. You could hack into some of their phones, and when you hacked into their phones, you could either see text messages, or it gave you like a song for the game, but you couldn't choose what it was. You couldn't hack into everything. You couldn't hack into like every ATM or a stoplight. It let me down a lot. The other thing I can think of is the Xbox 360 Connect. When it was first shown, it was this amazing piece of technology that was shown with Ghost Recon. You could take apart the Ghost Recon gun and then put pieces on the gun, on your gun, and modify it with the Kinect, all using your hands. So it kind of had that feeling of like you were Tony Stark putting together the Iron Man suit kind of thing. That kept true, but then they showed parts where like you were able to shoot the gun, and that didn't work out so well, and nothing really came out for the Kinect immediately, at least, that I can remember, that lived up to what that piece of tech was supposed to be kind of thing. So I was let down by that. Those are the only things I can think of, man. Like, I choose not to read anything about any games. Like, I'll see images and I'm like, all right, cool, that looks pretty sweet. Or, like, my friends will tell me about a game, and I'll look into that and pick it up. But, I try to stay away from hype. Like, I'll still watch conferences about games that are coming out, but I'll stay away from, like, the lead-up reviews of what people thought about the conference or other things like that. Sweet. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Hey, thank you, Santino, for the call, as usual. You've always got great messages and calls for us, and you're keeping our voicemail message line consistent and full. I never played Watch Dogs. We've touched base on that in the past, but it's one of those games that I think that if like Ubisoft was to have focused on like what the mechanics were and what the scope of the game like was meant to be, is like as far as like the hook and the original ideas of it, it could have been on probably a little bit more of a focused or maybe a lot more interesting of a game, or maybe more remembered game. But like at the time that it's released, I mean, look at what Grand Theft Auto 4 and 5 had done with just the sales numbers and the juggernaut that is, that companies have to respond and try and emulate those big successful games. And like that open world formula, like clearly has to be emulated. So everybody kind of jumped on board with that and took their take on an open world game. And when you have like the gimmicks and concepts of like all like that widespread hacking and world immersion, but you're in a giant sandbox like that, it just doesn't compute. Like there's no processing all of that content all together in a massive kind of open world like that. So I guess interesting concepts, but the execution I don't think was there. It got mixed reviews. I mean, generally favorable reviews if I remember, and people dug it. It didn't sell bad. It spawned a sequel. So, I mean, I'm sure Ubisoft will kind of continue that, as it goes on. But I definitely agree with the overhyped side of it. It was meant to be so much more, and ultimately you can't deliver when you get on that hype train, that money train that went on. But as far as the Kinect goes, yeah, I mean, I definitely have to agree. Like that initial video, I mean, I think you can say the Kinect was a success. I mean, it sold, and I think you can definitely say that the technology. I mean, people were interested in it. Did it live up to its hype? No. That initial Kinect hardware, that concept, that tech demo reveal of it, like literally holding a skateboard up to the camera, it scanned and recognized what object it was, and then boom, it was like in your game. Like it never got close to anything like that. Like, I mean, that's the definition of hype. I mean, it was oversold. I mean, Microsoft wanted a lot from it, and ultimately the delivered sellable package that it was could not live up to that video. Whether or not they knew that from the out of the gate, or they thought that the opportunity was there if developers took more advantage of the hardware, because I mean, I think that was part of its problem. I mean, even though it packaged with systems and it sold a lot, ultimately not every 360 owner had one, so not every developer could assume that the number of units out there, people would support it. So you got like almost like Wii shovelware style releases for it. So I get it. I understand it's why it failed, but at the same time, I mean, it's kind of like Xbox job to deliver that content firsthand to justify its existence. And I'll probably rant about that a little later too, because I feel Xbox is going through another revolution of that same action and thought process. But yeah, Kinect definitely overhyped, underdelivered. Agreed. Next call.
Hey, this is Leo Ruiz, first time a caller. I've been listening to you guys for the past few episodes. But yeah, biggest hype game that lived up to its expectations, I have to say Super Mario Brothers 3. I mean, the whole Wizard movie was just a big hype on the game. And as a kid, I remember watching the movie in the theater, and I couldn't wait to get that game, my hands on that game. And yeah, man, that was like a big thing back then. But more recently, I would have to say BioShock 1, Borderlands 1. Those are pleasant surprises that kind of flew under the radar for quite some time when it first originally came out. And were just fantastic, amazing games that, led to all the pretty good sequels after that. Biggest letdown, more recently, I would have to say anything that EA touches. There's Battlefront 1. Just wasn't what we all thought it was going to be. And more recently, I would have to say Mass Effect Andromeda. I've been a huge fan of the franchise, and this one was just garbage. Especially now that they recently said that they're not going to be backing it up with offline DLC. That's just a complete slap in the face to everybody that enjoyed the campaign in the story mode. And it just leaves us empty-handed. But yeah, enjoy your stuff. Great show. And talk to you guys later. Bye.
Thanks for the positive ones, the ones you did like and think that did delivered. I kind of feel like both Bordershock, that's a combination, BioShock and Borderlands, I think initially upon release, weren't like super hyped up. I mean, they were almost like, because they're both original IP. I mean, that's kind of a rarity these days. But they both ultimately ended up delivering like high praised and high reviewed and high sales as far as like, fans and critics go. But yeah, I never really got into BioShock games, not as much as like as Rich did, as we've heard. But Borderlands 1, I played a lot of that. It's one of those, like, a genre that's being kind of fused with, console friendly genres. It's like a hybrid of things coming to consoles that, have kind of existed in different styles on PC. That, Destiny and Destiny 2 are also running with. I don't think it's been quite as perfected as it could be, but they're definitely fun to kind of like grind through and get those like random drops and random weapons and like the rarity of things like that. I enjoy that. But as far as the under-delivered side of things, yeah, I think that's interesting. I can 100% stand by Mass Effect. I mean, that original trilogy, I loved. I was completely surprised by it when I got hooked by it, and I could not wait for all the games. It didn't quite end as well as I wanted it to, but I wasn't as critical of it as some people were. But only because I felt like, the story expanded beyond just Shepard's story, and then it kind of ballooned out, and then the tail end of it, you really only got like definitive resolution for Shepard as a character, but not really like these squad mates that you built relationships with over, hours and hours of 3 different titles. But yeah, still, I love that series. When Andromeda came out, yeah, I put in, I don't know, 6 hours into it or something like that. Never once was hooked. Was just like, I get that you couldn't continue Shepard's story per se, but the weird side delivery of how they established that world as being separate and almost just disregarding the actions and events of that first trilogy because it was in the future but in a different galaxy, and it was just awkward. Yeah, I think they kind of missed the mark across the board with that. And how could you? I don't have a concept at the top of my head that could efficiently continue the Mass Effect storyline and keep people as engaged. But yeah, it just, that wasn't it. And I agree with you, Leo, that definitely that should have been a lot better than it was. But at the end of the day, trying to play devil's advocate with it, what if the original trilogy didn't exist and that was our first taste of the Mass Effect world? Like the concept and the mechanics in it aren't bad. Restoring planets and establishing outposts and that kind of like conversational system. That stuff's fun, but I think it's through the lens of the original trilogy that we really see like all that it could have been and all that it isn't. So it's an interesting dynamic with Mass Effect. But The Wizard, you mentioned The Wizard. I loved that movie as a kid too. I really don't think it's a good movie though. It's one of those things that you think is great as a kid, but if you try and rewatch that, I'm sure that is not a well-written or well-paced quality piece of cinema. It was definitely a hype machine for Super Mario Brothers 3, which is one of the best Mario side-scrolling platform games for sure. I would say right behind Mario World. So yeah, that's a great pick, great call out. That was amazing. Nintendo of America hype machine making a feature-length film to announce and showcase your upcoming like obvious hit for your console. So yeah, that is the definition of hype. But thanks, Leo. Thanks for the call.
Hey guys, so I don't really have a definitive list like Darren, but I can tell you a few of my favorite games of a few consoles. My first favorite game, it was actually the first game that I ever I was somewhat forced to watch the cutscenes and like really understand the story. Because when I was a kid, I would skip the cutscenes, not know what the story was. I would just have a fun time just hitting buttons, and that's pretty much it. But Final Fantasy VIII, that's right. You guys thought I was going to say 7. That's wrong. 7 sucks. 8's the best. I personally feel like Final Fantasy VII is the favorite to most people because that's the first Final Fantasy they played. My first one I played was Final Fantasy VIII, and that's why I love it so much. It was great with the Guardian Forces and whatnot, and I didn't really understand the junction system because I was only like 10 years old. But yeah, fun game. For the GameCube, my favorite game was Super Mario Sunshine. Super fun game. Somewhat repetitive, but I was still a kid, so I really didn't care. I just had a blast playing it. But more recent titles, BioShock Infinite had a really well-written story, so it kept me like captivated. that's another game that I played on the hardest difficulty, and I still had a really fun time playing it. The Last of Us, I played it on grounded mode, so again, one of the hardest modes, but the story was just so amazing that I absolutely loved it. Yeah, I can't really think of too many games. I mean, Resident Evil 7 right now is one of my favorite games because of the VR, just full functionality of the VR. Just really put me in the game and scared the shit out of me multiple times with the headphones and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I sound cheesy saying this, but I pretty much feel like my favorite game is in the moment. Whatever game I'm currently playing is my favorite game because I just get so deep into the story and the way the game plays and whatnot. But yeah, that's it. I can't really. All right. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks again, Santino, for that call. That's Santino twice this episode. We actually didn't do a feedback episode between the last two, so he's given us feedback to both. And I really think it's interesting your choices of Final Fantasy VIII and Mario Sunshine, the successors to Final Fantasy VII and Mario 64, which are two of my favorite games. So it's almost as if you're younger than me, but inspired by the same type and quality of design, which, you are younger than me. That's everybody. That's inside facts. Whatever. Final Fantasy VIII, though, points to Squaresoft at the time, Square Enix currently, for seeing the success that Final Fantasy VII was, its mechanics, its delivery, its tone, all of it, and then just deciding no, we're going to do something different with our follow-up because that's just what the Final Fantasy system or releases had been. Kind of reimagining and reinventing gameplay hooks and mechanics and settings and stuff like that all throughout the series. So it was great for them to do that, just to kind of just try something different. Like you mentioned, the Guardian Forces and the draw system, drinking system, all that stuff. Completely removed from the materia system of Final Fantasy VII. I never personally got too heavy into 8. I think I probably attempted to start it 4 or 5 times, played a few hours in, but ultimately never hooked. But that's unfortunately the complaint for a lot of RPGs. If you can't grind through those first hours and establish yourself in the roots of the game, you're never really gonna find that sweet spot where you just kind of stick it out. But cool, that was great. And Super Mario Sunshine, that's again, it's just that a well-designed Nintendo Mario game. I mean, Mario Odyssey's just released, and I guarantee you that's a fantastic game. I don't have a Switch, don't intend to be playing it personally anytime soon. Maybe one day, if Nintendo does some things with the Switch platform that I can stand behind and justify a purchase with, but you can't fight or argue that Nintendo doesn't make some damn good games. So yeah, I find it interesting. You had some recent releases on your list. I mean, BioShock Infinite, I think people will agree with, and Last of Us, I can stand behind as well. That was for a game designed on narrative alone. It was an amazing story, but then it also had some really fun and gritty survival mechanics and really kind of visceral combat to kind of go along with that bleak setting. So it was all married and was an original concept. Came out late of the PS3's life from a studio who was already putting out fantastic Uncharted games and could continue to do that for a couple more titles. But I love that Naughty Dog knows when to hang its hat up on a franchise and try something different. So yeah, I 100% can agree with you on Last of Us. As far as you getting existential with the whatever game in the moment is your favorite, I don't know. I can't stand behind that. I've spent about 8 hours playing Dangerous Golf because it was on sale for $5 on the PlayStation Store last week, and I think I've expressed to Nicole when she's been watching me play it a couple of times about how not into it I am, but it's just I finish a hole and it's that carrot on a stick formula that I'm all right, just a little bit more. I know that that's not a good game. It's not bad, but it's just rough. And if they did a Dangerous Golf 2 and had a little bit of a bigger budget, I could stand behind. But it's just odd. That's the game I've been playing a lot of recently, and I can't. mirror your thoughts. But maybe that's because it's a smaller scale downloadable game and not necessarily a narrative driven like you were supporting, you were standing behind there. But thanks again, Santino. Thanks for calling in. As always, I hope you're looking forward to our newest episode too that we'll be recording in a couple of days, and continue to call in with us. Next call.
Hey guys, Nicole here. Calling to talk about or tell you what my favorite game is, and that would have to be Super Mario Brothers 2. When I was a kid, I got a Super Nintendo, and one of the first game cartridges I ever got was Super Mario Brothers All-Stars, and for whatever reason, like, I would always just love to play Super Mario Brothers 2 out of, like, all the games that were on there. I loved playing as Princess Peach because you could kind of, like, float around because of her dress. The game was, like, super easy and super just, like, fun to play with. So I'd say Super Mario Brothers 2 was, like, one of my favorite, like, all-time games. Probably one of the first games I ever really played. And Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, when I got older and was kind of introduced to, like, more games. Harvest Moon, Friends of Mineral Town, played a ton of that, like, on my Game Boy SP, which I pretty much stole from my aunt because I loved it so much, and I was just like, oh, I gotta have this. And one summer she let me play with it for, like, the whole summer, and before I went home she let me keep it, so that was pretty awesome. And then later on in the years when I was introduced to, like, RPGs, I'd say out of all the RPGs that I've played, I'd probably say either Final Fantasy IV or Chrono Trigger. Yeah, that's pretty much it. See you guys.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good fun list. I mean, I've already actually talked about some of those because I have an affinity for them myself. Harvest Moon, Friends of Middletown specifically. I do remember the SP for just obvious upfront discussion. Nicole is my wife. That's who I'm married to. So we have crossed gaming interests and experiences as we've gotten older. I remember when she got that Game Boy Advance SP, I had just the original Game Boy Advance, like the wide, non-backlit, glacier colored. What is that? Like clearish, weird color, whatever it was. Color doesn't matter. I had that one, and then the SP having that backlight and that clamshell design was just like super awesome. So I think I even traded my Game Boy Advance in just to buy some new games, which was kind of interesting because I would have to concede and give up the Game Boy so that Nicole could play it because it was definitely hers. But I took advantage of being able to play it myself, and that was a great system. Great amount of re-releases from previous systems like the Super Nintendo, and a great amount of original content, which is a staple of a good system. So that definitely was fun. Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy IV, I do remember you playing those through a lot, which it's also cool just because, as a big gamer myself, it was cool because those weren't games that I like impressed upon her or like forced her to play because I had an affinity for them. I've actually never played through Final Fantasy IV. I've never played through Chrono Trigger. She went through both and enjoyed them both, and it was cool to see. And the Super Mario Brothers 2, I understand and I can stand by that she loves that game. I don't know why you say it's easy. I feel like that was one of the ones that was maybe a little bit more difficult, like having to time your bomb throws and like falling through like certain blocks and stuff like that when you got into those underground sections with like those like rat bosses and stuff. Like that was always fun, and it's definitely the black sheep in the Mario family because it wasn't actually a Mario game in Japan, but the ultimately being tied into canon and having like the influence continue on with the other Mario releases. It's really cool to see. But that's a good list, a solid good list. I can stand behind and agree. Doesn't I don't feel the exact same way about those games, but those are games that I think everyone should enjoy if they like that style and that era of gaming for sure. Those are the top tier, cream of the crop. So thanks, Nicole. That's actually all the calls we have. But just talking about that. Like the original content and the balance of remakes and remasters and stuff on the Game Boy Advance, it kind of gets me thinking about a couple rants I've been going off on my own personal social media accounts about like the Xbox. And I did a couple articles. I'll probably throw the links in the episode description of the like Destructoid blogs like I created around them. But like I just think it's crazy that with like the way that the current gaming landscape is, I mean, with the sales success that the PlayStation 4 is, outdoing the Xbox 2-1, and then the Switch just kind of blowing things out and on pace to have more original or exclusive titles on its platform than Xbox has done in the last 2.5 years or whatever that the Xbox One has been out for, or 2 years. Like, I just don't get why Microsoft doesn't see the glaring opportunity to release more content. We're in an age where multi-platform games are definitely a majority of games that people will play. But I think any Sony fan, can understand and attest to like their favorite games being things like what we've talked about already here, like with Santino and stuff, like The Last of Us, games of recent years like Uncharted and stuff, Until Dawn. Being a completely kind of different experience. I mean, it wasn't a polished AAA game, but it was a well worth it, interesting game that I think that a lot of people should play. And it was just free recently on PlayStation Plus. If you had that, go back and dig through that. Even sequels to those awesome franchises, that you'd expect from Sony, like Gran Turismo or the upcoming God of War, which is like a reinvention of itself, but inspired by like a game that looks like The Last of Us 2, but that same kind of visceral like 3D combat that God of War is known for. That looks awesome. Detroit Becoming Human. I've kind of mentioned these upcoming games from PlayStation, and like it makes sense for a company who's selling so many systems. They're providing content to back it up, and I think like when Microsoft like walked out on stage and announced the Xbox One, and it had to backpedal on its odd design choices for like it's always on and like the ability to play in used games not necessarily being present. There were just weird choices that it had to kind of backpedal on, and reserving system memory and resources for its user interface and its Kinect. Impacted how multi-platform games were released and ultimately were inferior to PlayStation 4 versions. They could clearly see that when they looked at the dust settling after launch, that it was content and games that people wanted, and graphics aren't always it. I mean, even though the PlayStation 4 had the edge, that wasn't the reason why people were like flocking to the PlayStation. So. You'll probably hear me go more off about this in the future, or read those Destructoid blogs, and I'll post the links to those. But I mean, I could talk about games all day. Being solo here, it's not the most entertaining thing, so maybe I'll save some of this for next week with Rich. Again, you can call in with any question or any follow-up to our episodes. I mean, even if you're follow-up and you're just like starting to listen now and you went back and listened to our older episodes, do you got something you want to contribute or say, or your own thoughts or opinions on those, share those anytime. 605-777-0433. That's the phone number. It's just takes you right to a voicemail prompt to record a message. And we want to hear from you. Even if you have like your own just random question that's not related to one of our episodes, but you want to hear our thoughts or opinions on it, or you want to share your own story or opinion, call in and do that. We'll bounce back and forth and listen to you guys. That's the point of the voicemail line. That's the best way we can kind of have you guys feedback and communicate with us and keep this not just Darren and Rich, or in times like this, Darren only, but an opportunity for all of us to kind of build that community aspect of the show. So thanks. I like listening to the feedback calls. I like doing the regular shows, and I hope that we get to do a lot more of these. So with a little bit of time, I'm going to pad out here and just kind of share some stuff. I mentioned it when I was responding to one of Santino's call, but I was playing recently. I'll talk about the games I've been kind of attached to recently. Dangerous Golf was actually one of them. It was on sale for $5 on the PlayStation Store, and I'd always been interested in it, and I wanted to buy it when it was first released, but I never did. But for $5, you can't really go wrong. It was a string of golf games that came out. I think technically this year. Yeah, it was this year that I was actually interested in. It's by some of the developers who left Criterion Games, the guys who did like the Burnout games. So it's basically like think of like Burnout 3 or Burnout Paradise, and that the Smash Breaker, like what you could trigger after you crashed to kind of cause more destruction. You had like those like side elements besides the racing that you could do. It's that, but instead of cars and traffic, it's random realistic environments, and you're playing like mini golf or putting golf. So yeah, I don't know why, but that's what they did. It's actually pretty fun. It's rough around the edges, and like the entertainment is there, but it's just like, I feel like they could have worked on the controls a little bit, and they could have worked on the presentation, and then it could have been optimized a bit, because the loading times between holes is kind of ridiculous, and they're not like really massive environments or anything. So yeah. And the weird part is it's like the golf, like the final putting is almost an afterthought. Like I wasn't expecting like trying to read the green and adjust like the bank and the curve and the uphill or downhill or anything, but it really doesn't really need much precision. You could almost wildly and randomly shoot or putt anywhere in any direction, and if it's got enough strength behind it, which you can't choose the strength, it's either like very hard or a tap in. It'll eventually probably bank around and land in one of the holes that are littered throughout the level for part of its tasks or rewards. So, boy, I've spent, I think, more time than it deserves to be talked about. Dangerous Golf, $5 in the PlayStation Store, still might be there. There's like some co-op and some fun stuff that you can attempt to do with it. If you get it, hit me up, let me know. Since by Darren on the PlayStation Network, and I'll compete with your scores and play with you. It's got my stamp of approval for $5, but if you were to spend the $15 or $20 that I think originally was asking for, it might be a letdown. The odd thing was that also this year, that 100-foot tall giant or 100-foot giant robot golf, or it's whatever the title is, it's something like that. That was another golf game that was announced at the last PlayStation Experience. Maybe it was the one before that. I think it was announced the one before that, actually, but it finally came out this year. That was another one of those golf games that I was oddly looking forward to because of its design, but actually initially didn't pick up like I thought I would have. That's got a VR mode attached to it too, so it's one of those ones that I will definitely pick up maybe when it goes on sale itself to enjoy. And then for you Switch owners out there, I'm jealous that you get to play Golf Story. If you haven't downloaded that, I would highly suggest it, or at least look at the trailer for it. That looks like a if you played the Game Boy Color Mario Tennis title, there's RPG elements, open world kind of exploration. Maybe even you probably never even played that Game Boy Color title. I'm one of the few who probably even remember that one. But maybe Stardew Valley. Compare it to that. There's open town NPCs, kind of like little quests you can do to progress through it. But then you're also playing a golf game with it, NES Open style golf game. It looks super fun. I am super jealous to play that. It's probably the one game that's not on a PlayStation platform that I am the most jealous of not being able to get my hands on. So it's an indie developer. It's not published by Nintendo. It could ultimately one day end up on PlayStation Network or PC or something, and I hope it does, because I will play the hell out of it when I can. It's just something that I'm excited to try out. So if you play it, let us know. Hit us up on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or call into our voicemail line. Brag about enjoying it if you have, and share with us the games that you've been playing too. That's something that we can also just kind of chat back with. These episodes are yours to kind of sculpt and create based on what you call in with. So I think with that, we'll I will wrap this episode. It's not going to clock in as long as the other episodes have, but again, it's something to get the ball rolling and get us back engaged to get our full featured follow-up episode out. A teaser for what the topic is going to be: remakes, remastered, rehashes, the good, the bad, and the games in between. I'm excited to talk about that because there's been a number of games that I've actually been like wholeheartedly standing behind and loved their reissues, and some that have just missed the ball and just missed the idea and concept of what a remaster is. And with that, next Tuesday, actually, L.A. Noire comes out 6 years after its original release on updated hardware, and if you have a Switch, portable on the Switch, though I will definitely be playing it on PS4 just because of the boosting graphics and the enhancements that's going to bring. So with that, thank you for listening. Thank you for making it all the way to this point. Thank you for hearing me out solo without Rich. And I look forward to chatting with you guys again with these voicemails. Take it easy.